Well, this weekend at Daytona was certainly interesting. The rain is falling and so is the salt. The rain is falling and the salt is flowing. That sounds a lot better. And what the hell am I talking about? Well, we're going to get into all of that right now. So let's get into it. This is The Fuel. What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to today's edition of The Fuel, where today we're going to be reviewing the Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona. The final time, at least for the time being, that the July Daytona race is going to be held on the 4th of July before it moves to the regular season finale starting next year, which to me was a dumb move, but that's neither here nor there. But, man, I gotta tell you, this race was all over the place today. Like, where do we even begin? From the first stage being a total snooze fest, to a second stage that was starting to see a little bit of desperation, maybe, sense of urgency, because of weather that was approaching, and of course weather has kind of been a big thing the last couple of weeks in NASCAR. Mother Nature just sucks sometimes. But you know what sucks even more right now? This fan base. And the absurd amount of salt that is coming out of this fan base is just absolutely sickening. But we're going to be getting into all of that here before too long. But before we get into all that, let's get into some news of the week. For the third time this season, the new disqualification rule made an appearance in a NASCAR event. First time, of course, was a couple weeks ago at Iowa, when Ross Chastain was disqualified from the race win after his truck was too low. Then a couple weeks later, I forget which race it was right off the top of my head, but Christopher Bell got disqualified from the third position. And then on Friday night in the Xfinity Series race, AJ Allmendinger was disqualified from the third position. I would assume probably because the car was low. And of course, he was driving for Kaulig Racing, who went 1, 2, 3 in that race. And of course, Ross Chastain was driving the winning 16 car. So that's kind of ironic that one of the Kaulig cars got disqualified from the Xfinity race, and thankfully, I think for a lot of people, it was not Ross Chastain. It was actually AJ Allmendinger that got disqualified. But Justin Haley, who we are going to be talking about here at the end of this race, at the end of this review, for obvious reasons, I'm pretty sure, finished second. He's running full-time in the Xfinity Series. And Ross Chastain, who recently declared that he was running for the Truck Series points, ends up winning an Xfinity Series race. Speaking of Ross Chastain, this guy is just raw talent. I mean, when you look at everything that he has done in the past couple of years, he's taking teams that are competitive, but kind of like a notch below what the top tier teams are. He's taking those teams and putting them in victory lane, seemingly on a consistent basis right now. I mean, he gave Nice Motorsports in the Truck Series their first win. And now, here in the Xfinity Series this week at Daytona, of course he's a Florida guy, so this was certainly a big deal for him as well. He ends up winning the race for Kaulig Racing and getting their first victory as well as a team. And, you know, I posted on Twitter, why doesn't this guy have top tier equipment right now? I mean, he was slated to have top tier equipment this year in the Xfinity Series, because he was signed to a full-time deal with Ganassi Racing to drive the 42 car. And then, of course, the DC Solar debacle happened and they went under. and that forced the 42 Xfinity team to basically close up shop, and that basically left Ross Chastain hanging in the wind, which absolutely sucks because it's pretty clear that this guy has the talent to be in a top tier ride. So it boggles my mind how, I mean, honestly, his performances this year in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, I mean, when you look at his body of work this year, big teams with the big budgets, you know, they should be coming and knocking on his door asking for his services, because let's be completely honest here, we saw it last year at I believe at Las Vegas when he dominated and won that race. We saw it at Darlington when he was a contender to win that race. When you get a guy like that into top tier equipment, he is going to rock the racing world. I mean, just look at what he's doing in mid-tier equipment. He's putting it in victory lane on a consistent basis. Imagine what this guy could do in top-tier equipment. Not to mention the fact that, I mean, look at how marketable this guy is. You know, and also he has one of the most unique victory celebrations that I've personally ever seen. I mean, who had ever heard of a driver celebrate winning the race by smashing a watermelon? I mean, has anybody ever done that before? I don't think anybody has. And of course that comes from the fact that he's a watermelon farmer by trade. And so the whole watermelon thing, it's it's not really a forced thing. I mean, it's part of his trade. You know, he's a watermelon farmer, so it really shouldn't be much of a surprise. But yeah, him winning at Daytona on Friday was especially sweet for him, considering that he is, you know, from Florida, and you know, Daytona for Floridians is basically like super holy grail. I mean, it's a holy grail place to win for any stock car racer, but especially for those from Florida. So, but yeah, Ross Chastain needs to be in a high tier, either a high tier Xfinity Series ride next year, or a good Cup car, because it's pretty clear he has the talent and he's a very marketable driver. So it honestly boggles my mind that he doesn't have a big time ride yet. Although he would have this year if it weren't for the DC Solar debacle. But I mean, he keeps getting knocked down and he keeps getting back up, and not only does he keep getting back up, but he just continues to win in middling equipment. I mean, how is that not worthy of, you know, being put in a top tier ride? You know, I mean, it's pretty clear that he has shown that he can drive a race car, and I will be very surprised if he's not in a big time ride next year, whether it be Cup or Xfinity. Honestly, it doesn't matter at this point. He needs to be in a big time ride next year. Period. End of discussion. And that's all I got to say about that. Well, let's go ahead and get into the race review for the 2019 Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona, race number 18 of the 2019 season, which means that after this race we have 8 races remaining to determine who will be the 16 drivers competing in the NASCAR Cup Series playoff. This race was delayed from last night due to rain. Rain was basically a bitch all weekend long. I mean, the Xfinity race, you know, saw delays. Cup qualifying was canceled due to weather. And then the Cup race, of course, was delayed to Sunday. It started at 1 o'clock. The green flag was actually slated to fall at like around 1:30, but they moved it up to 1:04 due to possible weather, which eventually came into the area. But thankfully not until after Stage 2 was completed, because under the new rules, ever since they went to the stage format, before, if a race got to the halfway point, then the race would be considered official. But here, even if they get past the halfway point, a race is not considered official until the second stage is completed, which they managed to do pretty quickly, I might add. And then things got crazy in stage number 3, and yeah, this race was all over the place, to say the least. But let's go ahead and get into it. So, of course, got my notes here, as I always do. So, stages 1 and 2, 50 laps, stage 3, 60 laps. Initially, they were going to have stages 1 and 2 be 40 laps, and then the final stage be 80 laps, but they decided to change it up a little bit. So I guess to prevent having to do like fuel mileage crap at the end of stages. So because qualifying got canceled, the field was set according to owner points, which means that Joey Logano would start from the pole. So the race starts, he leads lap number 1. We immediately get 2 pure lead changes right off the bat. We actually had quite a bit of pure lead changes in this race, actually 3 times more than we did in the Daytona 500, if that tells you anything. Which is weird. But we had our first pure lead change when Kyle Busch took the lead momentarily on lap 2. And then Logano took it right back on lap 3. We had 3 wide from about 6th on back for a while, but this was when the race really started to... God damn it, dog. Sorry about that. This was when the race really started to put me to sleep. You know, the low line was starting to pull ahead, and then the top 12 got single file, and then the dreaded high line choo-choo train formed, and that's when you knew this stage was done. Put a fork in it. It sucked. Stage 1 sucked for the most part. Logano leads the group onto pit road for green flag pit stops, and then the second half came on. Denny Hamlin nearly spins it out coming onto pit road, but thankfully his teammate Kyle Busch was inside of him, and he was actually able to brace against the 18 car, and it actually helped him drive out of the spin. The potential spin, I should say, which was pretty crazy. Didn't really do any damage to either car, so that was pretty interesting. Harvick actually cycles out with the lead, and the train reforms. So pretty much the rest of the stage was just boring single line bullshit, you know, that we've seen in the past, and it's just like, ugh, this is not what we wanted to see out of this race, but we're already getting it here right on stage number 1. But Logano does make a move on Harvick for the race lead on the backstretch. Basically pulls the old slingshot move on him, and takes the lead down the backstretch, and takes the stage win away from Kevin Harvick. So we, at the very least, had our 3rd pure lead change on lap number 50 with Joey Logano, and of course he won the stage. That stage sucked. Stage 1 sucked ass, and I was like, I'm hoping that this is not going to be the case for the rest of the race. It wasn't. Everyone comes in for service, obviously. McDowell takes no tires. Chase Elliott is the first off with 4 tires, but I think McDowell had to come back in for some reason, because Elliott was leading at the start of stage number 2. We had our 4th pure lead change on lap 56 when Ricky Stenhouse took the lead. Stenhouse had a fast car in this race, but then the first caution came on lap 58 when Stenhouse spins off the front bumper of Kurt Busch, when Kurt actually had a run on the inside and Stenhouse tried to block. So everyone comes in for service. Clint Bowyer leads on the restart this time. Austin Dillon gets pushed out to the lead by Chase Elliott on the restart, so no pure lead change there. Blaney gets a run to the outside for the race lead, and we get our 5th pure lead change on lap 64. But then Dillon fights back on the inside and retakes the lead the very next lap. So 6 pure lead changes so far. The top 6 go single file in the front. Stenhouse starts charging his way back towards the front because, you know, he's on 4 fresh tires. But then we get our 2nd caution on lap 76. Kurt Busch gets into the turn 2 wall and then cuts the right rear tire down. He ends up spinning in turn 3, and he actually clips the rear of the 62 car of Brendan Gaughan and completely rips the back off of the 62 car. Kurt is able to keep going, got some damage to the right front, but he was able to keep going. And he is going to be a big focus at the end of this race too, which we will get to in a minute. Dillon leads on the restart, but then we get our third caution on lap 83. Harvick tries to give a bump draft to the 2 of Brad Keselowski, but I don't know if the 2 was too loose at that point or if Harvick hit him too hard, but he basically puts Kes into the outside wall, and Harvick gets nudged into the wall by Logano. Hemrick and Suarez spin out as well in this incident. So several cars come in for service at this point. Dillon leads on the restart. He also had a good car in this race as well. And it was at this point that everybody realized rain could be a factor because you could actually see them in the distance. Lightning was more the worry at this point. Hamlin gets caught in a sucker hole and goes backwards in a hurry. Lightning starting to move into the area. They basically have a policy in place where if there's a lightning strike within an 8-mile radius of the venue they're racing at, then they have to throw the caution and bring the cars down pit road for 30 minutes at least, until the storm passes through the area. They weren't at that point yet though. So it was like, man, this race for the stage win could end up being for the race win. Wasn't exactly the case, but the sense of urgency was definitely there, and it would remain that way for the remainder of the race. Clint Bowyer gets a huge push from behind to take the lead off turn 2. We had our 7th pure lead change on lap 97, but Dillon fights back on the inside and regains the lead on lap 98 for our 8th pure lead change of the day, and Austin Dillon wins stage number 2 after fighting off Clint Bowyer. And this is not going to be the last time we'll talk about those two. Everyone comes in for service. Chris Buescher ends up staying out, but then he would come in on the one to go. Logano, Newman, and Jones take just 2 tires, while everybody else takes 4. So now we get to stage number 3. Logano leads the start of stage 3. And then Ryan Newman, who took just the 2 tires, gets pushed to the lead by Dillon. But Dillon has a great run to the inside, basically pulls the old slingshot on him as well, because Newman actually got out to a bit of a lead down the backstretch, and Dillon just basically inhaled him and shot to the inside and took the lead very easily. Reclaimed the lead, which was on the restart, so no pure lead change. But we would certainly get a couple more of those. Logano makes the run on the outside with help from Stenhouse. So he takes over the lead once again for our 9th pure lead change of the day on lap 110. The racing's really getting intense now. I mean, they're all basically in one big pack, and they're jockeying for position, going 3 and sometimes 4 wide, and I'm thinking to myself, this is not going to end well whatsoever. I said I would not be the least bit surprised if they had a big wreck at some point. We're going to get to that in a second. So then Paul Menard actually starts coming on the outside. I'm thinking to myself, wait, what? Paul Menard? Actually goes 3 wide around the outside for the race lead on, I think it was Dillon and Logano, who were on his inside, and he actually takes over the lead for a lap. Harvick smacks the wall. I think he cut a tire down, but actually makes it back to the pits, and we stay green. So we had our 10th pure lead change on lap 112, and then Denny Hamlin, who had been pushing Menard, gets a great run to the inside of him, and he takes over the lead for the first time on lap 113, and Menard fell back into the pack and was not a factor ever again. And then we had our 12th and final pure lead change on lap 118 when Austin Dillon took over the lead again on the outside. But then we had our 4th and ultimately race deciding final caution on lap 118. Bowyer, who was pushing Dillon to the lead at that point, tries to dive underneath of Dillon. Looked like either Dillon tried to block or Bowyer got into him a little bit and got him loose, but either way, Dylan comes down the track, comes across the nose of Boyer, and gets spun going into turn 1. And at that point, it's like, oh shit, here we go. There's the big one. And it's like, who's going to make it through? Kurt Busch actually made it through this wreck. He was on the outside and just barely made it past the spinning cars of Boyer and Dylan. 17 cars were not so lucky though. Among those that were involved, all 4 JGR cars were involved, so Kyle Busch, Truex, Denny Hamlin, and Eric Jones were all involved in this crash. Joey Logano, Chase Elliott took a hard hit to the outside wall. Clint Boyer, I listed Logano twice. That was weird. Stenhouse was involved pretty heavily. Ryan Preece, Alex Bowman, Paul Menard, Kyle Larson. Ryan Blaney was involved pretty heavily. PackerMan, and several others. There were a total of 17 cars that were involved in this wreck. And the race would never get back under green because with weather moving in, Kurt Busch would inherit the race lead in all this. Several drivers would come in for service because I think a lot of them were expecting the race to go back green. But Kurt Busch decided to stay out until they knew for sure that they were going to go back green. And here's where the controversial part comes in. They gave the 1 to go signal at the line, so they were going to go back green. So at this point, Kurt Busch and his crew chief Matt McCall brings him in to get his service done because they were under the impression that they were going to go back racing. But then a timely lightning strike within 8 miles of the track forces NASCAR to put the race back under yellow. They have to turn the lights back on, and they have to bring the cars back into the pit lane and put them under the red flag for at least 30 minutes. Now, the reason why they have this policy in place because I think it was a couple years ago at Pocono, a fan was actually struck by lightning and killed at the racetrack when a storm blew in. So I think that's one of the reasons why they have this policy in place now. It sucks, but it is in the interest of safety, and the last thing they want is a massive lawsuit heading their way because someone got killed from being struck by lightning. And all those people up in the grandstands, I mean, they're sitting on basically what amounts to a bunch of aluminum and metal, cobbled together to form a grandstand. I mean, that's a lightning magnet. So they basically had to put the race back under yellow. And Justin Haley, who actually stayed out when Kurt Busch went in, he was actually going to lead the field to the green. He inherits the race lead, and he is going to be leading when the red flag is displayed. Now bear in mind that there is actually no rain at this point. They have to bring the cars in due to the lightning that's in the area. And they have to wait a half an hour from the previous lightning strike. So they're basically having to wait it out. And after about, I'd say, 45 minutes, it's looking like the storm is starting to clear out. And they actually order the drivers back to their cars, and I'm pretty sure Haley was like, well, it was fun while it lasted. They're in their cars for about 3 minutes. There was a little bit of drizzle that came in, but it had actually moved away. So they were driving the track and getting everybody in their cars and stuff. And then another rogue lightning strike hits near the track, and it's like, well, shit, now we gotta get the drivers back out of the cars, and the lightning clock is basically reset. And then the heavy rains came in, and you could tell that NASCAR really wanted to try to get this race in because they waited for almost 3 hours from the time they red flagged this race to the point where they eventually called it. And during this entire time, Justin Haley, I can't imagine what he was going through at that point. I mean, what was going through his head. Because if you recall last year in the Xfinity race, he was the first to the line, but was black flagged for going below the double yellow line, which a lot of people thought was a pretty ticky-tacky call. Although it was clear that he did go under the yellow line to make the pass. So that's just the way it was. So the win was taken from him. So this would have been sweet redemption for Haley if they actually called the race and he was declared the winner. And just his third career start driving for the very low-funded Spire Motorsports. I mean, this is a team with Quinn Hoff. I mean, they were basically back markers everywhere else. They were basically moving chicanes everywhere else, especially with Quinn Hoff behind the wheel. But they put Haley behind the wheel this week, and they weren't terribly slow. They weren't contenders by any stretch of the imagination, but they weren't exactly in the way either. So they decided to stay out, and after about a 2.5 hour wait, the race is finally called, and Justin Haley is declared the race winner in the Coke 0400 at Daytona. It's pretty crazy. I mean, the racing in stages 2 and 3 was absolutely crazy, and then, of course, this happening is just Justin Haley. And of course, this is coming before. I don't know if they've done an inspection yet, which actually I'm going to check and see if inspection has been done. Let me check on Twitter real quick, because that's what all the cool kids do, right? Give me 1 second here, and I'll also get the results as well. Okay, from the looks of it, it doesn't look like they finished inspection yet. So at this point, it's still unofficial, but your unofficial top 10 results here at Daytona. Justin Haley, of course, with the victory. William Byron with his best career finish in second. Jimmy Johnson coming home in third. And then the rest of this top 10 is what the fuck. Ty Dillon coming home in fourth. Ryan Newman, who I've dubbed Mr. Irrelevant because that's just what he is nowadays, comes home in fifth. Corey LaJoie comes home in sixth in the 32 car, another backmarker team. Eric Almirola seventh. Matt DiBenedetto finishes in eighth. Matt Tift in ninth. And then Kurt Busch, who of course came down pit road under that caution, and then of course got screwed by a lightning bolt, finishes in 10th, although he's probably going to be he was extremely heated on the radio. And the other crazy thing is Justin Haley is not running for Cup points, so he's not going to be racing in the Cup playoff. He's racing, full time in the Xfinity Series. But a part-timer in just his third career start gets his first Cup win at 20 years of age. That's just crazy. And a redemption story for him after what happened last year in the Xfinity Series race. Absolutely insane. And it looks like the points have not been updated at the time I'm recording this, but I'm pretty sure they'll be updated by the time I start editing it here in a little bit. So I'll show it up in the upper right hand corner of the screen as I usually do. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't really change all that much, considering that Justin Haley is a part-time driver. So still looks like 9 spots available for a race winner to get in. So still pretty interesting run to the playoff, which is now 8 races away. As for my final rating for this race, I really don't know, man. This was definitely one of the weirdest races of the year, I'll tell you that much. Daytona always seems to do that. I mean, Speed Weeks was weird as all hell, and now here we are in July, and this race was just weird as all hell as well. But the first stage, it sucked ass. There was literally nothing going on. Stages 2 and 3 was when it really started picking up. I mean, we had a dozen pure lead changes, which is 3 times more than what we saw in the 500. And lots of craziness under that caution with Kurt Busch coming in when it looked like they were going to go green, and then the lightning hit and Justin Haley gets a shocking win for Spire Motorsports of all teams. I'm going to give this race a 7 out of 10. That's what I'll give it. Stage 1 sucked, but the other stages were pretty good, and we got a surprise winner out of it. So I'll give it a 7 out of 10. And that'll be my rating for this race. But before... okay, never mind. Before I sign off for this review, it's time for a segment that I debuted a while back and haven't really brought back in a bit, but it's definitely time to bring it back for this race. It's time for the dumbass of the week. And the dumbass of the week here in NASCAR is all of the raging, salty fan base motherfuckers who were basically raging about how NASCAR called the race early, you know, and all this other bullshit. Basically, you know, saying how, oh my god, I can't believe they let Justin Haley win and he didn't deserve to win, you know, all this other bullshit. It's like, seriously? To the NASCAR fan base who is salty as all hell, 2 things. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. And I have a little prop in my hand here, because this is basically what a lot of the NASCAR fan base is being. Salty as fuck over Justin Haley winning when he was saying, oh, he's not supposed to win, he doesn't deserve to win, you know, bitching about NASCAR calling the race early when they waited 2.5 hours. You know, they wanted to get the race in. So for all you salty fan base people, for all you people that are in the NASCAR fan base that are salty over this, shut the fuck up. I mean, seriously, the way some of you are reacting with your comments and all your other bullshit is just, I mean, why do you think I don't want to, I mean, I can't even begin to describe, you know, how disgusted I am with this fucking fan base, seemingly on a weekly basis. Because, I mean, some of the shit that some of you salty ass fans say, I mean, it just seems to me like you have enough sticks up your ass to supply the White House with enough wood to build a fence around the whole fucking property. It's ridiculous. I mean, and you wonder why other sports fans look down on NASCAR fans with such contempt. Because of how toxic this fucking fan base is over the dumbest shit. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of seeing it. If you're that fucking butthurt, nobody's forcing you to watch. I know that's not exactly something that I should be saying, considering that, you know, NASCAR's fan base isn't exactly all that big these days, but honestly, we don't need the fucking toxicity on a constant fucking basis. Now, admittedly, I've been hard on NASCAR at times, but, you know, I'm one of those guys that calls it like I see it. If I think a race is good, or if I think something is good, I say so. If I think it's bad, I say so. I'm not toxic just for the sake of being toxic like some of these motherfuckers have been. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it needs to stop. Period. It makes the entire fucking community look like fucking trash. But apparently some of these people just don't give a shit, and they just want to spew venom just to spew venom, just for the fuck of it. And you wonder why I don't want to be associated with this fan base. Nothing but a bunch of bitching and whining fucking assholes. It's ridiculous. And there's no place in the sport for it, to be honest. Especially to the degree that they've been doing it. It's ridiculous. Well, I've gotten that off my chest, and that will do it for the fuel this week. The last time for the foreseeable future that Daytona will be, that the Daytona 400 will be held in July. Next year at this time we'll be at Indianapolis. God help the people that actually go there, because Indiana in the middle of July, yeesh. And Indianapolis doesn't have lights either, so it's going to be a day race. I don't envy them at all. But this coming Saturday, the Cup Series goes to the Kentucky Speedway, which under this new aero package could actually be a good thing for it. I mean, honestly, we could see the best Cup race that Kentucky has ever put on. We'll have to wait and see. And also IndyCar returns this week as they go to Toronto. They're going north of the border to Exhibition Place for their yearly trek to Toronto for the annual street course race there. So that's going to do it this week. Thank you very much for watching. A day of surprises, to say the least. And until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out. Have a good one.